Why? And what are the key factors behind the sudden advance of the armed factions into the central Aleppo? And how is that affecting the Syrian army's positions?
Syria has been struggling for over 13 years with an internal conflict, or a variety of internal conflicts, actually. A conflict that essentially left over 600,000 people dead and 13 million Syrians displaced in Syria and abroad. So it's quite understandable to see why Syria has become such a fragile state at the moment. Even though there was a lull in the fighting in Syria over the past 4 years, since 2020, approximately, the front in Syria was reignited once more by the Syrian militants or the armed factions in northern Syria when they launched a full-scale offensive against the governorate of Aleppo. And for further perspective, so that we can understand, Aleppo is Syria's second largest city, and it is the economic capital of Syria. So now, with it being most of the governorate of Aleppo and as well as the city under the control of these militants, it's quite a huge blow to the Syrian government and the Syrian armed forces, unfortunately. And what led to this is Syria's main sources of support, regionally and globally, namely Iran and Russia, have been preoccupied with other conflicts and other crises in the region and in the world. So, for example, Iran has its own debacle it has been stuck in regarding the wars in Gaza and Lebanon, and Russia has been preoccupied with the war in Ukraine. So this led to maybe a decline in the capabilities and the support system of the Syrian armed forces. And about the timing is quite strange, to be honest, because it serves many regional and global agendas that I can dwell upon later on.
Exactly, and this is exactly the point that we want to pinpoint our fingers on. The current situation in Syria and whether or not it is linked to regional dynamics, instabilities that is surrounding the ongoing Israeli conflict.
Of course, the 7th of October and its aftermath was a watershed moment in the regional situation, or in the Middle East region, in terms of geopolitical developments and security developments as well. And it basically ignited each and every dormant conflict in the region, apparently including the Syrian war now. And that is because of the altering balance of power and the changing power dynamics in the Middle East itself. So Syria, the Syrian government, is a major component of the so-called Iranian axis. It is an ally of Iran. Iran supported the Syrian government in the war against terrorist groups and armed militias. So now Iran was preoccupied supporting Hezbollah, and Hezbollah itself was a major proponent of the pro-government forces in Syria for the past 13 years. So now with Hezbollah basically relocating most of its units back to Lebanon to fend off an Israeli invasion that was taking place up until a few days ago. And now there is a fragile ceasefire in Lebanon, and it could collapse at any moment. So with this taken into perspective, we have to understand that Iran's overstretched resources rendered it unable to provide the adequate support needed for the Syrian government so that they can withhold and fend off and push away such an attack or an offensive by the armed factions of Idlib and the north, these extremist factions, of course. And at the same time, it's important to understand the relationship between Israel and some of these armed factions in Syria. And this is something this is not a secret, this is not a conspiracy theory, this is something that was spoken of by former senior Israeli officials, including a former Israeli head of Mossad, who admitted that they have lended support to some of these armed factions in southern Syria at some point of the war in their fight against Hezbollah and the Syrian armed forces. So there is some sort of relationship. I'm not saying that Israel gave a green light or that Israel had a role to play in the militant attack on northern Syria, on Aleppo and later on Hama. However, I see that these developments serve Israel as it weakens Iran's hold or Iran's ties to its allies in the region, and Iran's capabilities, potentially Iran's capabilities to supply Hezbollah in Lebanon. So I say it as way too convenient for Israel that this is to take place right now at a moment where they are trying to besiege Hezbollah and deprive it of all of its sources of funding on arms, predominantly from Iran, of course. So it's quite interesting to see how this is serving their agenda. Another country that is benefiting from this in some way is Turkey. Turkey has supported these armed factions in northern Syria and has provided them with support over the past few years. And Turkey was seeking to normalize its relationship with Syria. However, Syria placed a very serious condition that it will not normalize relations with Turkey unless Turkey withdraws its troops from northern Syria, because this is an illegal occupation. So maybe, who knows, the Turks may have given the green light to these militants to attack and reopen the Syrian front once more, to exercise more leverage and more pressure and apply more pressure on the Syrian government so that they can give them the necessary concessions that can make them deal with their security concerns concerning Kurdish separatists inside Turkey and inside Syria.
Dr. Osman, you mentioned the timing. And you mentioned the surroundings or the abouts of the whole situation in the Middle East. And you mentioned that the timing serves the interests of Israel. How is that exactly? And is it coincidence, the statements of the Israeli Prime Minister right before the attack of the militants on Idlib, and how in the same time Russia is responding to the latest escalation in Syria?
Well, for the first half of your question, of course, Israel, I wouldn't go as far as saying that Israel orchestrated this or that it had a direct role in planning this militant offensive, because this would be pure speculation. We do not have any reliable evidence that would support that. However, we can say that Israel is benefiting from that with absolute certainty, that they are the ones who will benefit the most from destabilizing Syria and curtailing Iranian influence and what they see as Iranian influence in Syria. Because Syria serves as the land bridge between Iran and Hezbollah and Lebanon. So severing or hampering the security and the continuity of the flow of weapons and material and supplies from Iran to Hezbollah serves Israel, especially that the fragile ceasefire in Lebanon might collapse at any moment in the next 60 days, and we might be back to square one. But this remains to be seen, of course. So Israel stands to benefit from that, and I think this way, as I told you, that's the only way I'm willing to put it. Actually, it's way too convenient for Israel. To be honest. On the other hand, as for the Russian predicament, what happened also serves the United States and NATO in the war by proxy against Russia in Ukraine. The Ukrainian war is entering a very decisive phase right now, and Russia is advancing in eastern Ukraine and in southern Ukraine, and is securing victory after victory, and is improving its battlefield situation.
Very much clear what you're speaking about. Briefly, before we go, Dr. Osman, let me ask you, what is needed from the international community at this very particular time, and what is needed by world bodies like the UN and definitely the Arab League and all the involved partners in the region?
Many Arab countries have expressed support for Syria and the war against terrorism, and this is a war against terrorism. In my view, these are terrorist movements. So including Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Iraq, and many other countries have pledged support. The United Nations, the European Union, the West, they need to take into consideration that Syria now is fighting factions that include international terrorist organizations like HTS, Jabhat Tahrir or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is an affiliate of Al-Qaeda, and it is an international terrorist organization. So taking this into perspective, the international community should provide all the means of political and military and security and economic support to the Syrian government in their fight against terrorism, and to put aside all of the political calculations and the geopolitical calculations that might make them see otherwise, or that might make them see that Syria is part of a larger war by proxy between the West and Russia.